රින් වෙළඳපොලේ අඩුම මිලකට රුපියල් 199යි.
In your headlines tonight, persevering struggle. Goldface Green mass protest marks a week. Stability talks. Hours-long talks continue between President Gotabaya and his former cabinet of ministers. Orderly and fair market. Sri Lanka declares 5-day trading halt to avert impact of economic crisis. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9. This Saturday, the 16th of April, 2022.
Nelly, මතකෙන් ගිලිහුණු black shiny කෙස් කලඹක රහස sunset black shine සමගින්.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
And a warm welcome. You're joining us on AdaDerana English News, your primetime news bulletin on AdaDerana 24. And tonight, in your headline-making stories, President Gotabaya Rajapaksa is chairing several rounds of discussions on the present situation of the country, as according to the President's media division. He is currently in talks with his former cabinet of ministers. The first round of talks was held with Finance Minister Ali Sabri, Central Bank Governor Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, State Minister Shayant Semasinghe, President's Secretary Gamini Senarat, Chief Advisor to the President Lalit Veeratunga and Finance Ministry Secretary M. Siddhawardana. The President's media division said another discussion took place with officials of the Ministries of Finance, Energy and Health. For the 8th consecutive day, people continued to gather at the Goldface Green stretch and in front of the Presidential Secretariat, calling for the President to step down and government be removed. There was, however, public criticism today as people and the Bar Association of Sri Lanka decried when police trucks were seen parked opposite the Presidential Secretariat. However, police media spokesperson SSP Nihal Talduwa clarified that the trucks were brought to the vicinity of the protest to provide essential supplies to police personnel stationed at the protest site.
On a day like today, a week ago, the largest and longest protest in Sri Lanka in recent times began at the Goldface Green. Since the 9th of April, protesters have persevered and continued to maintain their struggle, calling for the incumbent president and the government to step down. The numbers gathering along the Goldface Green stretch has seen no change, continuing to attract people of different walks of life, religious leaders and representatives of different communities. Last night, veteran cricketer Sanath Jayasuriya joined the struggle to extend his support. Meanwhile, a noteworthy observation was the Vadda community joining the campaign. And today marked the 8th consecutive day since the protest was carried out. A rather conspicuous sight at the protest today was that a few police trucks were parked in front of the Presidential Secretariat close to the roundabout. This immediately drew the criticism of people as images of the fleet of trucks were circulated on social media. In relation to this, the Bar Association of Sri Lanka issued a statement saying it had received credible information of a number of police trucks being moved into the vicinity of the mass protest, and that the BASL views with grave concern any attempts to disrupt in whatever manner what is a peaceful protest by the people of the country. The apex legal body went on to say that any such attempts would only have grave repercussions for the country, democracy and rule of law. Following objections, measures were taken to remove the trucks from the premises. When AdaDerana inquired from the police media spokesperson SSP Nihal Talduwa of the incident, he said that the trucks were brought to the Golface Green vicinity in order to provide supplies of essentials to police officers who had been stationed there for over a week. In the meantime, another protest was staged in Galle in support of the mass protest being carried out at the Golface Green and in front of the presidential secretariat.
And now we have with us Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna lawmaker who decided to remain independent in Parliament, former Justice Minister Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa joining us. A very warm welcome to you to our studios. Your group that decided to remain independent, yes, we saw solidarity there, but afterwards with Shanta Bandara taking portfolios, accepting portfolios back in a cabinet that immediately resigned due to this mass protest. It seems that your group, yourselves, among yourselves, has no unity, cooperation, and this struggle is a fail there itself.
No, in fact that I became independent 1.5 years ago. On the day the President presented the cabinet paper to establish this Colombo Port City Commission, I became independent, then I went to court, I didn't vote for it. Thereafter that there are 10 other members who have become independent, and Mr. Shanta Bandara is a part of the SLP, not in our group, but at the moment we are working all together, about 42 independent members that who had been a part of the government previously. In fact that on Shanta Bandara's issue, what I have to say, that we being politicians will have to understand that the sovereignty is in the people. We are not the owners of the sovereignty. That we are only trustees for and on behalf of the people who are having inalienable sovereignty with them. And therefore, this is a classic instance where that all the politicians to learn a lesson that you cannot go against the sovereignty of the people.
But can't this lesson be for the politicians to work together in this need of hour?
No, in fact that there is a great responsibility cast upon the Speaker and the opposition leader in the Parliament, that we were pleading but there is no any outcome from them. That is why that this struggle is going on, dragging on.
What does this mean by the opposition and the Speaker? Does this mean, now it seems that the government is still strong. The independent group, the opposition altogether have failed to amass that 113 majority, it seems, which is why political sources confirm to us that another 4 to 5 ministers will be appointed to this cabinet.
In fact, that 113 majority, it is a myth. You need not have, 113 or the majority in the Parliament to form government. That most of the government in the world are minority governments. In fact, that we formed minority government together with only 41 members in the Parliament in 2015 January. You can recall that how many important bills and laws that we passed in the Parliament. 19th Amendment, Victims and Witnesses Protection Act, the Drug Regulatory Authority Act. There's so many things. It doesn't mean that you will have to have 113. When it comes to a crucial time, whether yours is a minority government or with a majority, it makes no difference, so long as that you bring all the laws and resolutions or whatever the decision for the benefit of the people.
So does the constitution or the legal and the regulatory space in the country prevent lawmakers as you, the opposition, in moving ahead?
There is no any restriction. In fact, that we have that freedom, we have that right. But the problem is now that the move must come from the main opposition. The opposition is held by a different party. Then the other important factor is the Speaker. Now, whenever there is this kind of constitutional deadlock in any other country, any other parliament, in fact, the Speaker is the one who took the troubles to resolve all this problem. But it is unfortunate in our parliament that our our speaker doesn't contribute anything.
So does this mean the problem is not really only with the government, as we see thousands of citizens marching out to the streets outside Goldface Green? We see a massive struggle today continuing for an 8th day. But you say, Dr. Rajapaksa, that opposition has to come here and initiate, and then you say the speaker too. But cannot Parliament itself come together and bring solutions to this crisis, the biggest crisis Sri Lanka has been facing since its independence?
No, that there are so many crises. That is the political crisis, economic crisis. It has a long history. This is what I predicted 1.5 years ago. You may recall through your media that I came and expressed my view that we are heading for a disaster like this. That is exactly happening. Now, it is a responsibility on the part of the government. The president is in the government, the cabinet is in the government, then they have the 2/3 of the in the parliament. With all that, that is the blunder that the government has committed. That if they listen to us, that we could have avoided all those things. You can see soon after the present president was elected, who was holding the biggest portfolios, all the corrupted ministers, corrupt officials. When he took all around and all the responsibilities were given to all the corrupt people, that he should have expected this. We expected, we predicted. Not only we predicted that, we express our views and we pronounce that. Exactly it is happening. The last December I said that you cannot go beyond April, that there will be a big uprising in the country, because the young people, that they are strong, they are educated, that you cannot hoodwink them forever. And therefore the politicians also should know what is their limit and what is their obligations.
So are you saying this is completely due to corruption, the appointment of corrupt individuals to positions, or is there a deeper issue here? Because we see a forex crisis that
How it happened? You know that our workers in abroad, that they were sending more than $600 million monthly. Now that has come down to 200 million. Why? They say that so long as corrupt politicians are ruling the country, that we will not send a single dollar. Now that they in fact, that in breach of the constitution, that they passed a law and established this Colombo Port Commission, saying that it will be a the world recognized trade hub in Asia. What happened? Is there a single investor? Now it has become a Chinese colony. That is why I was objecting. Therefore, that the president and the government, especially the cabinet, in fact, that's the main portfolios were held by a rotten lot.
But I heard you say recently too that one family can't run a government or country alone. But this is the same family that you too fought to bring back to power.
In fact, that the Gotabaya Rajapaksa in every election campaign said that he will not promote that family bandism. He will rule it out. He will get the Viatmaga, that means educated, most of the educated professionals to run the country. Is there a single professional in his cabinet who can run the country or a ministry? That is why we believed, because that he was a citizen in America, he was living there for some time. We thought at least that he has that common sense when he rule in the country, in a democratic country, that we thought that he will rule out the family bandism, he will rule out all these corrupt people. Now he got all the corrupt lot around him. Then how can he run a country?
Let me also touch upon 21A, the Amendment 21 to the Constitution. You say you'd table it as a private member's bill. Enlighten us about the amendments that you envisage through this.
No, there are so many other aspects of the Constitution also to be amended. But here, that's in considering the urgency, that I submitted the 21st Amendment solely for the purpose of removing all the executive powers from the president and to make him ceremonial, and executive powers to be exercised by the cabinet of ministers who are responsible to the parliament and to the people, headed by a prime minister.
Now the opposition says repeal 20, go back to 19.
That is the problem, that opposition says you repeal it. Who will do it? Just because opposition asks the government, you repeal the constitution or you amend the constitution to abolish the executive presidency, will the government do it? Government will never do it. That is why I proposed from the beginning, you must get the government, you must get the power, then move that in the parliament as we did in 2015.
So you do say that a minority government could be set up even with this limited number of seats. You can press the government. So what's keeping the opposition from pushing government or taking that initiative?
My personal view is that if I were the opposition leader with 40 or 50, I would have definitely we will take the problem into our hands to resolve, because this country is waiting. They are watching, they are seeing what we are doing. That opposition leader can take the government even with a minority and thereafter to bring all the necessary laws. If 47 members in the parliament can pass the 19th amendment by getting 215 votes, why can't now you do it? If the law or the constitution, the whatever, if it is for the benefit of the people, it is for the interest of the people, general public, the members of the parliament cannot vote against it. That you will have to make sure what you bring into the parliament is not for your benefit. That for the benefit of our people.
What now, Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa? Where do we move from here? We see the president in crisis talks, continuing to talk with his former cabinet of ministers, as well as with the opposition and the independent group, the SLFP, as well as SLPP independent groups and other opposition parties. But how do we move forward here? There are people on the streets, but the 225 in parliament should come about this issue and find a solution.
No, that is why on behalf of the independent group, we met the president twice in the course of the last week. Then I have given the proposal, the resolution to the parliament to form an interim government. Then we gave it to the president that in principle that he agreed for it. But what I understand is now that he cannot remove the prime minister. While he wanted us to form that interim government, while that Mr. Mahinda Rajapaksa remaining as the prime minister, which we cannot agree. Because the president also must now understand that it has been far rooted now. The people's main concern, his main demand is the president must go. The prime minister must go, the government must go. And therefore that it has gone too far. Now I don't think, in considering the agitation of the people of this country, that until the president resigns, that the people will continue this struggle.
I'd like to speak further, but this is all the time we have in studio during our live. Thank you very much, Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, for joining us. Former Justice Minister between year 2015 and 2017, Dr. Vijayadasa Rajapaksa, President's Counsel and Member of Parliament, representing the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. We'll take a short break here at AdaDerana First at 9.
Big 3.
Welcome back. Former Minister Namal Rajapaksa admits that the Gotabaya Rajapaksa administration hasn't been as transparent as required, saying they should have been more open and vocal about their plans for the country. In an interview with Indian digital platform The Print, Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna parliamentarian talked about the need for systemic change in Sri Lanka, while also raising the need for a stronger and progressive opposition.
Some people say it's a crisis that was built within last 2 years, but I personally believe it's something that came and we walked into it. One of the biggest accusations we have is that we don't inform people, which I agree. The relevant ministers, officials should have been more open and more vocal as to what is their plan is going to be and how are they going to face these kind of challenges, because this is not a challenge that Sri Lanka is facing on its own. Because in Sri Lankan history, if you look at the changing of governments, have always happened through democratic way, but through a crisis. I don't think the next government has to come through that. So next government has to be elected with a plan and with a vision to address the crisis.
Namal Rajapaksa highlighted the issue in Sri Lanka to being with the current system in place and stated that unless it changes, the country cannot take progressive steps into the future.
The question is, what is the system that we want to change? Is it the politicians only, or is it the administration structure? So I personally believe we need to change the administration structure. We do have a very vibrant administration in this country, but it has to be revamped and upgraded to face the modern challenges. Without doing that, there is no point of changing the faces. I will always say we need to have a strong opposition. But at the same time, I think we need a progressive opposition as well. It's not about being strong and toppling governments. This is what happened in Sri Lanka for the last 74 years. You build a strong opposition, you topple the government, then you carry on the same system. But it hasn't done anything good to us. We still don't have private universities in our country. But we have $2 billion spent by students to go and study abroad. And renewable energy is something that we all talk about. But our laws and regulation doesn't allow private investors to come and put mega scale renewable energy projects. And when you talk about private investments, privatizing or public-private partnership, there's a massive misinterpretation in the system. If you don't let the private sector grow, and if you don't allow them to come and grow with the government sector, that it's going to be very difficult to have a progressive economic growth in the country.
India's Tamil Nadu Chief Minister M.K. Stalin said that measures have been taken to provide essentials required for Sri Lanka's faced with a food crisis. Now, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister yesterday urged the centre to allow the state to ship essential commodities from the Thoothukudi port to Sri Lanka as humanitarian aid to the people, especially Tamils severely affected by the food crisis. Recalling his discussion with the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the issue on March 31st, the Chief Minister reiterated the Tamil Nadu government's commitment to ship food, grain, vegetable and medicine from the port for the people in the northern and eastern parts of Sri Lanka as well as capital Colombo and those working in the plantations. During his meeting in March, he had apprised the Prime Minister about Tamil Nadu's willingness to provide essential commodities and life-saving medicine to the Sri Lankan Tamils. The Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka today directed the Colombo Stock Exchange to remain closed for 5 business days starting Monday, the 18th of April. In its directive, SEC said the decision was taken in the best interest of investors as well as other market participants. The market regulator went on to say that informed investment decisions could be made if investors are afforded an opportunity to have more clarity and understanding of the economic conditions presently prevalent. The Securities and Exchange Commission said it carefully evaluated the impact the present situation in the country could have on the stock market, in particular the ability to conduct an orderly and fair market for trading in securities. The Board of Directors of the Colombo Stock Exchange had yesterday sought a temporary closure of stock market, citing the present situation in the country. In addition, many other stakeholders of the securities market, including the Colombo Stockbrokers Association, had also sought a halt of market activities on the same grounds. Now, the Singapore government will contribute $100,000 as seed money to support the Singapore Red Cross public fundraising efforts for Sri Lanka's vulnerable communities. The Singaporean Ministry of Foreign Affairs said that the move would supplement Singapore Red Cross's earlier pledge for urgently needed medical supplies and other basic necessities in aid of vulnerable communities in Sri Lanka. This was in response to Sri Lanka's economic and humanitarian crisis, which has led to widespread resource shortages across the country, said the SRC in a press release. Citing the Sri Lanka Medical Association, SRC said that all hospitals in Sri Lanka lack access to imported emergency drugs and medical equipment, leading to the cessation of surgeries at several hospitals. It has also launched a public fundraising appeal to rally donations to support these communities with medical drugs and equipment. Now, Nepal is asking citizens living abroad to deposit funds in domestic banks as part of efforts to ensure the financial system has enough liquidity and to preserve foreign exchange reserves. Speaking to Reuters, Nepal's finance minister denied that Nepal was facing an economic crisis, despite the impact of soaring commodity prices as the tourist industry, a key source of revenue, struggles to recover after the COVID-19 pandemic.
Nepal, wedged between China and India, this month imposed curbs on luxury good imports to rein the capital outflows. Foreign exchange reserves fell over 18% to $9.6 billion as of mid-March, enough for around 6 months of imports. Nepali Finance Minister Janardhan Sharma said the economy is not facing a crisis and that Nepal's situation could not be compared with Sri Lanka. In Nepal, remittances by overseas workers, which constitute nearly a quarter of the economy and are crucial for external payments, fell 3% to $5.3 billion between mid-July to mid-March, compared with a 5% increase in the same period a year earlier. Nepali Finance Minister encouraged deposits to Nepal, saying those living overseas would continue to maintain their ink as well as benefit from 6 to 7% interest offered by Nepali banks. Sharma said that if 100,000 Nepali nationals living abroad deposited $10,000 each in Nepali banks, it could go a long way to help Nepal overcome the current liquidity constraints. Nepal has also decided to accept $659 million in aid from the United States and about $150 million in soft loans from the World Bank.
President Gotabaya Rajapaksa called talks with energy sector officials today to discuss the country's fuel crisis. Officials of the Ministry of Energy and Ceylon Petroleum Corporation attended the discussion, during which the head of state had requested the officials to procure sufficient stocks of fuel to last the next 3 months. According to reports, representatives of Petroleum Trade Union were also invited to take part in the discussion. In the meantime, Chairman of the Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, Sumit Vijayasinghe, requested all owners of petroleum bowsers to send their vehicles to relevant terminals and depots in order to streamline the distribution process this weekend, as adequate stocks of fuel are available. The CPC yesterday limited the dispensation of fuel volumes to vehicles except for buses, lorries and other vehicles used for commercial purpose. Thereby, filling stations are permitted to pump only fuel worth 1,000 rupees for motorcycles at a single time, while the limit for three-wheelers was set at 1,500 rupees. Meanwhile, the maximum amount of fuel allowed to cars, vans and SUVs is at a value of 5,000 rupees per time. However, the fuel distribution process is yet to be restored to normalcy. Filling stations in many areas remain closed today. Meanwhile, the unloading of fuel stocks from the tankers that arrived in Sri Lanka under the Indian credit line is currently in progress. According to the CPC, the 2 fuel tankers contain 41,000 metric tons of diesel and 37,500 metric tons of petrol. That's all from us here tonight. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.